I'd like to thank everybody for coming out tonight. We're going to go and get started with the presentation, and then we're going to break into an open house after that. I'd like to thank everybody for coming out tonight. Public participation is vital to our process and everything we do. And as I said a few minutes ago, the format of tonight's meeting is to start with a presentation and then break down into an open house to answer questions one-on-one. We do have a court reporter in the front of the room who is available to accept official comments. I forgot to grab my prop comment card from the table. That if you have comments and you want to take them home and think about it for a day or two, we do have prepaid postage comment cards. You can take some, give some to your friends and family, and let them fill them out and send them to us. And also at the end of the presentation, we'll have our email address, physical address. So there's multiple ways that you can reach out to us and give us your thoughts and feedback on everything. So without any further ado, I'll turn it over to Sarah Bradley, who will begin the presentation.
Thanks, Matt. Welcome. Thanks everyone for being here. My name is Sarah Bradley, Senior Project Manager for the Corps of Engineers out of New Orleans. Could probably say hi to everyone here. David Gavell from Senator Graves' office, Congressman Graves' office. Thank you.
We'll take your promotion.
Mr. Bishop Connie, Greg, thank y'all for being here. Gary is here. Martha, thank you for being here. Nestor, got the family here tonight, so I appreciate y'all being here and being with us tonight. So, why are we here tonight? So this is not our first time being here. We've spent about the last 15 months working on this study. This was initiated on October 9th, 2018, the CPRA, the Barataria Basin Study. We did a round of meetings in the fall and winter of 2018. We met in St. Charles Parish for a data gathering workshop. We held public meetings in New Orleans. We came back out in the May time frame to Thibodaux and St. Charles area to introduce some of the measures that we had been evaluating and get some public feedback on those. And we're here with you tonight for a very special meeting. After about a year of public meetings, of the team working very hard to identify the problems, the opportunities, management measures, alternatives, preliminary costs and benefits, we have identified at this point at the New Orleans District a tentatively selected plan for this study. So I want to share that with you tonight. The big thing to know, our draft integrated feasibility report and environmental impact statement are out on the street right now for public review. And so that's really the purpose of this meeting, to let you know that report is on the internet. It's available for your review and for us to really try to encourage you to comment on that report. So the feasibility report is really our decision document. It's going to walk you through our 6-step planning process and how we arrived at the decisions that we're going to introduce you to tonight. And the environmental impact statement is going to walk you through the impacts to the community, socioeconomics, environmental threatened endangered species. And so those documents are combined in a format that we hope is easy to read, and we encourage folks to read that and provide comments tonight. Certainly welcome your comments after just the presentation if you don't have time to read the report. As Matt said, we have the court reporter here, we've got comment cards, welcome to talk to us, and just really looking to get that feedback on the plan. So let me talk for a minute about the importance of this time frame. So we have identified our tentatively selected plan. And what that is, it's essentially our proposal at this time. It's a recommendation by the New Orleans District of a solution to the problems that we evaluated over the last year. It's going through 4 different types of reviews right now. The first one is an agency technical review. So that's where folks all across the nation within the Corps of Engineers are going through our report and associated work products and making sure that the analyses were done correctly and that the right decisions were made. We're also doing an independent external peer review, and those are folks outside the Corps. Those are folks that we hire from the public, 30 plus years of experience in their disciplines, often academics, that also take a look at all of our work products to make sure that we're coming to the right conclusions. We are doing a legal and policy review to make sure all the regs, policies, guidelines have been followed. And the 4th review that's happening right now is that public review. And again, that's why we're here tonight, to let you know that's happening and encourage your participation in that review. Once those reviews are complete, we will go through all of those comments, determine the significance of those comments, and that leads us into our agency decision milestone, which is coming up in the March timeframe. And that's the point at which this tentatively selected plan / New Orleans District recommendation gets elevated up to higher headquarters and senior leaders within the Corps to make sure, as an agency, that we're making the right corporate decision. And so your input here tonight and through the public review period helps us prepare for that to ensure that we have the right plan moving forward. So the agenda for tonight, I will quickly introduce our tentatively selected plan so I don't torture you with 20 slides until we get there. But then we'll walk you through how we got there, the background of the project, how we identified the management measures and the alternatives, what the costs look like, what the benefits look like, and how we came to that decision. And I'll ask Matt Bowen to help me walk through those slides. I'll come back up and walk you through the schedule over the next couple of years to get us to a final report that we can submit to Congress. And then I'll go through a couple of FAQs with you, just things that we think you may be interested in before we break to the open house. So our tentatively selected plan is a 7.5-foot levee. It extends off the existing St. Charles Parish levee across the basin. The cost is about $514 million, although that doesn't include armoring for levee resiliency. Based on that $514 million, it has a benefit cost ratio of 1.5. So the benefit cost ratio is important for the Corps of Engineers to recommend a plan to Congress. We need a benefit cost ratio greater than 1. And what that means is that the flood damages prevented are more than the cost of implementing a project. So basically you're getting a return on that investment. So 1.5 is a good BCR, benefit cost ratio. Just to speak quickly to the armoring, which Matt will go into some detail on, we do recognize at this elevation of levee, there could be some overtopping in the future, so we're looking at some matting, potential concrete, a way to really reinforce this levee to make sure that it lasts throughout the lifespan of the project. So some quick background, how did we get here today? Congress gave us authority to do this study back in 1998. So the Corps of Engineers always needs 2 things from Congress to initiate any type of study. The first thing is that authority, that permission to do something. And you can see if you read this, it did authorize a number of purposes for the study, and I'll hit that in just a second. I want to call your attention to that. And the second thing that the Corps of Engineers needs before we can initiate a study is appropriations, and that's money, that's the funding source. And so the funding for this study came out of the Bipartisan Budget Act of 2018, and that came from Congress following the Great Flood of 2016 in Baton Rouge and the hurricanes Harvey, Irma, and Maria that swept through the Gulf Coast and Puerto Rico. And so that was a big benefit to the project. Oftentimes the Corps is provided money incrementally, and sometimes you can have a kind of start-stop thing going on in the study process. So we were really set up in a good position by Congress. We got all of our money up front so that we could maintain that momentum throughout the study process and keep the team going. One thing that appropriation did was it limited our scope to flood risk management. So because it was a supplemental bill based on flooding, we are not really evaluating for wetlands and ecosystem restoration and salinity intrusion. Those things would be ancillary benefits, but we're really focused on reducing flood risk to the study area. It is a 3x3x3 study, so let me just take a second to explain that. Back in 2012, Congress and senior leaders at the Corps came up with a new framework for studies. Historically, the Corps would spend a bit of time and a bit of money studying things, and so there was kind of a swing in appetite for that, and so we are now under a regime where we have 3 years and $3 million to provide a chief's report to Congress. It also includes 3 levels of vertical integration, and that just means that when you talk to me or anyone at the New Orleans district, just know that we are talking with our division office in Mississippi and our headquarters offices in DC. Those folks are on all of our phone calls, our milestones, they're involved intimately, and they help us make these decisions as we go. So traditionally the Corps process you'd go one by one through those levels of leadership. And at this point, we all work together to make sure everyone's on board and we're getting to the right answer. I may have mentioned this, it is 100% federally funded. So Congress, through the Bipartisan Budget Act of 2018, gave us that $3 million up front without cost share, which is fantastic. So CPRA is the non-federal sponsor for this project, and they've been a huge asset to our PET. They do sit in on our bi-weekly phone calls, they provided modeling information, they help us with engineering and stakeholder management, and they've really been a good second set of eyes on our process, and it's been great to have them as part of this team. We also do all of our traditional coordination with our stakeholders, so your local, state, federal resource agencies, the levee districts, the parishes, and tribes. So try to engage as many folks as we can, and of course the public through this type of meeting. So this slide just walks you through kind of the history, and I think I mentioned some of this at the beginning of the presentation, of the public meetings and other types of meetings that we've had along the way. So we did have those kickoff meetings about a year ago. That was the time in which we came out and said, tell us about your problems. Are you flooding? How much are you flooding? What are your sources of flooding? Help us understand what's happening in your community so we can develop some good alternatives to address those. We had the public meeting in New Orleans in January, and then over the next couple months, we spent that time taking that feedback and identifying those problems, those opportunities, and some of those management measures. We came out in May and introduced you to those management measures and those alternatives to get your feedback at that time through the NEPA scoping process. And through that feedback, we're getting to today where we have that tentatively selected plan. So we did have a couple big calls, like I said, in the summer and fall of this year to introduce some of our key stakeholders to this process. And so we've gotten some good feedback there. And we do have monthly stakeholder conference calls to make sure all of our key stakeholders are plugged in along the way on our status, on our path forward, and that also includes our congressional delegation. So this slide kind of walks you through the process that I described earlier, but it's always easier to see with a graphic. So we started the study back in October of 2018. That first 3 months I talked about, that was scoping. Those were those initial public meetings, just understanding the problems, trying to frame up and get some context around this study. We then spent the next 9 months evaluating the alternatives and those measures that came out of those meetings and came out of our project delivery team. We did recently hit our tentatively selected plan milestones, so we briefed our division and headquarters office. We got their blessing on our tentatively selected plan, which we're going to go through with you tonight, and that also gave us the approval to release that draft report for public review, and that's really why we're here tonight. I talked about the 4 types of reviews happening between the tentatively selected plan and that agency decision milestone. So that last green star is a really big one for us. Again, that's probably the March timeframe where we'll be making that corporate decision on our tentatively selected plan. If that's a successful milestone, we'll then go into about 9 months of what we call feasibility level design. And so that's going to be taking that tentatively selected plan and really digging into it and refining it, working with the engineers, the economists, the environmental staff, and really refining everything about this plan. So what we have right now is kind of conceptual, preliminary costs, preliminary benefits. This says 12 months, it's more about 9 months, and then a lot of documentation, right, of fleshing that out even further. And then of course, beyond this slide, after we get through this Washington level review and our chief's report, when this project, if this project is authorized, we'll go into the real design phase we call pre-construction engineering and design. And that's where you're going to come out with your plan specifications and give the real nitty-gritty detail on what this plan is going to look like. So this walks you through really our 3-year study process. So we are in between those 2 green stars, so we do have a bit of work to do. So again, your feedback is really critical to help us make sure that we're making the right decision for the agency decision milestone, as well as to influence some of the analysis that we can do during that feasibility level design phase of the process. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Matt Boland to walk you through our planning process.
All right, thank you, Sarah. Thanks everybody for coming out tonight to learn about the Barataria Basin and where we're at in what we've selected for our tentatively selected plan. If we look back to the study authority, it says the Upper Barataria Basin. So we define this area as just south of the Mississippi River, all the way to Bayou Lafourche. And it runs from Donaldsonville all the way to just past US Highway 90. US Highway 90 is a critical evacuation route for the area. In the area in the sense of all the way from New Orleans, all the way to Houma. This map also shows the watershed in the area. The blue arrows represent the canals in the area, and the yellow arrows represent watershed over land. There's only 3 ways that water can leave this basin after it falls in the basin. Most of the water which comes out Bayou des Almonds. There's a path at Paradis Canal, and there's also one just south of Dufresne Ponds. The study area is around 800 square miles. There's about 28,000 total structures in the area, 10% of which are commercial and 90% of which are residential structures. Most of the structures are located up on higher ground. The basin itself is average ground surface elevation running east to west along Highway 90 is around 1.5 foot in elevation. So it gives you a sense of where the structures are in the basin and how close we are to the Gulf. The water then runs into Lake Salvador and then right into the Gulf of Mexico. So once we define the area, we have two specific types of models that we use to understand our types of damages, how significant our damages are. We have an ADCIRC model for coastal storm modeling, and we have HEC-RAS modeling for rainfall. For the ADCIRC modeling, we ran anything from a 500 to a 50 to a 500 year frequency, and that was over a 50-year period analysis starting in 2023 to 2073. The sea level rise, the relative sea level rise was an intermediate condition in the modeling. With the rainfall model, we looked anywhere from a 2-year to a 500-year frequency event. The table, we put this in the presentation just so you can convert. Most people are familiar with the reoccurrence interval in years. That you can convert with this table to annual exceedance probability, AEP. So for example, a 100-year frequency it correlates to a 1% annual exceedance probability. So once we understand our damages in the area, we then formulate for measures in the area. There's two buckets that we formulate out of. There's structural measures and non-structural measures. Some of the structural measures we formulate with are levees, flood walls, floodgates, pump stations, and ring levees, specific with these alternatives that we developed. And there's also non-structural. Non-structural, we specifically looked at house raisings and dry proofing. We developed a total of 11 alternatives, including the no action alternative. The no action alternative is if there's no construction, that if we come to the point where we have no construction or no project in the area, what will occur in the basin? Subsidence will continue, sea level rise would continue, Gulf encroachment would also continue. We developed 8 alternatives. We presented those back in the public scoping meetings back in May of 2019. Since then, we developed 3 additional alternatives, and that was in collaboration with the federal resource agencies and feedback from the public scoping meetings back in May. One of the 11 alternatives is a non-structural alternative, most of which are structural alternatives in forms of levees or pump stations. One thing I wanted to point out here, this is all of our alternatives here on this map. The existing St. Charles levee portion, I wanted to point out, extends from the Mississippi River levee system down to just south of Paradis. It's at a 7.5 foot elevation. Most of our formulation is off of this alternative, or this structural component in the basin. Alternatives 1, 2, 6, and 10. And if you can't see it here from this presentation, we have these poster boards also placed in the back so you can get a closer look at them. These alternatives 1, 2, 6, and 10 are either built off of the existing St. Charles levee, building it up in elevation, or extending out across the basin towards Raceland. Alternatives 3, 4, and 5 are specific to regions within the basin, such as Raceland, Des Allemands, and Paradis. Alternative 7. Alternative 7 is a non-structural application for the basin, and we look specifically at house raising and dry proofing of non-residential structures. Alternative 8 is real similar in the alignment of Alternative 6, but it incorporates raising Highway 90 on the southern end past the Frame Ponds. Alternative 9 is our only rainfall alternative. This rainfall alternative incorporates a pump station in Bayou des Allemands along with the gate structure. This would decrease the backwater conditions. The next step in the planning process is the screening phase. We screen based on as Sarah mentioned before, the benefit to cost ratio. The benefit to cost ratio has to be above a 1.0. Alternatives 3, 4, 5, 6, 8, and 9 were screened out based on the cost benefit ratios either under 1 or opposing guidance and regulations. As you can see below on the table, alternative 1, 2, 10, 7, and the no action alternative were considered in the final array. The benefit to cost ratio of alternative 1 came in the highest, about a 1.5. The net benefits came in around 10 million. And the total of construction costs came out to be about 514 million. This is also known as our tentatively selected plan, and it's also known as a National Economic Development Plan, or NED. Now, NED has the highest net benefit, but it also has to be above unity on the benefit to cost ratio. It has to be above 1. With the alternative 1, we have to add resiliency to this levee. It's built to a 7.5 foot elevation extending across the basin. I'll go into a little bit more detail here in a minute on it. To make it a resilient levee, we have to add high performance turf reinforcement matting or concrete. And this will be applied to the existing St. Charles portion of the levee and also the extension portion all the way to Raceland. The table below shows the cost differences and how much more this high performance turf reinforcement matting is going to cost. And it also compares the cost increase of if we had to concrete the whole entire levee for resilience. And you can see the benefit to cost ratio does decrease a little bit, but it still is above unity. So this slide here is going to go specifically through details on the TSP. It begins at the very end of the existing St. Charles levee portion at Parady's control structure, item 12 on the list. And again, this is another map in the back of the room, just for reference for everybody in the room after the meeting. It continues to move south along the Sunset Levee District with a series of flood walls where structures are located directly behind the levee system. There's a crossing at Bayou Gauche. A roller gate system will be placed there. If you continue across Bayou des Almonds, we will have a 270-foot barge gate. This barge gate will only be closed during a coastal storm event. Continuing along the south side of Dufresne Ponds, there is a stop log gate, which will continuously be open until the event triggers it to be closed. Continuing parallel to Highway 90, there's the structures 7, 8, 9, and 10. Those are culverts with sluice gates. The total cost, like Sarah mentioned earlier, it's about $514 million, not including this additional armoring for resiliency. And the benefit to cost ratio is a 1.5 for this cost. There will be potential house raisings, potential non-structural applications that we're going to be looking at around the alignment. We still have quite a bit of optimization to do on this alignment to raise sections where houses are directly located behind the levee. This is a NEPA document, so we have to be NEPA compliant. Just to go through a few topics here, we have the cultural side of the NEPA document. We've initiated consultation under Section 106 in the National Historic Preservation Act of 1966. This is with the State Historical Preservation Office and the Tribal Historic Preservation Offices. And it is a programmatic agreement under Section 106. For the environmental portion, we've taken into account the threatened and endangered species in the area. There's a potential for them to be on site, but it's very low likelihood of them being in the area during construction. The water source has not been tied down yet. We know it's within 15 miles of Bayou des Almonds. There's lots of commercial borrow sources available in the area, government borrow sources as well. We have a mitigation plan. Recreational impacts. We wanted to put this on here. We know that there's a lot of traffic in Bayou des Almonds, recreational traffic, a lot of boating occurs on the bayou. With the 270-foot barge gate, we don't feel that there will be a significant impact on the recreation in the area. And after that, I'll hand it back over to Sarah. She'll go through the schedule. Thank you.
So I think I've probably hit this a few times already. The big things to remember, March 2020 is that agency decision milestone. Again, that corporate level decision that this is the right plan to move forward with feasibility level design on. And fall of 2021 is when we're going to have that chief's report, and that can be submitted to Congress for authorization and appropriation of a construction project. So we wanted to walk through a couple frequently asked questions, or I guess really they're questions we thought would be raised before we break into the open house portion of this meeting. So the first question, is this proposed levy a repeat of an earlier project the Corps proposed? So most of the folks in this room are familiar with the Donaldsonville to the Gulf study. We, at that time, and none of the Corps staff here tonight, I don't think, worked on Donaldsonville to the Gulf in detail, but from what we understand, essentially Donaldsonville to the Gulf did not include rainfall impacts. It only looked at 1% level of risk reduction, and so we've really taken a fresh look for this study. It is not a repeat of Donaldsonville to the Gulf. We've adjusted the study area, we've incorporated rainfall into our analysis, we've looked at varying levee heights and various levels of risk reduction to ensure that we come out with a solution for the study area. Will there be another chance to provide feedback? So this really is, at a minimum, the time to provide your feedback. This is the public review period. However, we do recognize if there are any significant changes to this tentatively selected plan in the future, we will come back out for public meetings and let you know, disclose that information to the public if we have some significant changes to the plan that we're presenting to you this evening. Am I part of the non-structural plan? So we don't have that answer today. Essentially, if we get through the next milestone and this levy is approved, what we'll do is we'll do another round of modeling, of H&H modeling. And what we'll do is we'll have that levee system in place, and we'll look at the effects of those flood frequencies coming up. And if there are areas that have residual risk, those could be addressed through a non-structural project. So we'll look at that in the feasibility level design phase. When is the project going to start? So it's a tough question to answer. What I can tell you is the schedule for the study, that 3-year study. So in fall of 2021, October 2021, we will have a chief's report that may be submitted to Congress for authorization and appropriations. Once Congress takes those actions, we'll then go into a design phase and construction follows after that period. So at this point, all we can say is we're doing a study, and contingent upon subsequent authorization and appropriations is at the point at which construction may occur. Are there going to be impacts for recreational use? So Matt kind of hit this already. So we've heard from some of the folks in the public about their access to the bayous and the canals within their areas. So, we don't have those answers now. That's something that we will work through in the feasibility level design phase, taking those comments into consideration, looking at ways that we can provide that public access. And certainly if that is a concern for anyone here tonight, we would like to have that comment in the record. And speaking of comments, so here is our study website, email address, and mailing address. The report is on our website, so you can download it there. And these are the various ways in which you can provide formal comments. Those formal comments, as I mentioned earlier, will go into the final report, and you will be able to see how those comments were addressed in that final report. And so with that, I think I'll turn it back to Matt.
So that concludes the presentation. I remember my prop card coming back up here. These are on the sign-in table. Like I said before, take one with you, take multiples with you, give them to friends and family, let them think about the study, let us know what they think. And with that, we will break to the open house. If you work for the Corps of Engineers, raise your hand. basically everybody in the back of the room. If you have any questions about anything, any comments, please talk to them, discuss any particular details you may have. Our court reporter is at the front of the room to take official comments, and there's other ways to get in touch with us. So with that, thank you for coming out, and we'll go ahead and get that open house started. Thank you.